Have I got loads to share with you today? Last week we covered part one of our special interview with Shane Harker, CEO and founder of Rethink Resource. You got to know who Shane is and learn about his business. If you haven't seen part one, click the link above. Yeah, this side we're going to do it. Yeah. Catch up in part one. And in part two, we're going to be covering today the nuts and bolts about Rethink Resource and the magic that takes place behind the scenes. You guys pumped or what? My name is Elish P. This is Foodpackaging TV, where we bring you the latest in industry news, interviews, and of course, food packaging. Wicked! Okay, Chicks and Jacks, today we're going to learn about the service territory that Rethink covers, the affordability of the services, how does Rethink actually operate, and does Rethink really recycle? And how do they sort out that composting and organics? And lastly, how do you get in touch with Shane and Rethink? So let's just jump right onto it, shall we?
I really like the program, to be honest with you. I gotta ask you, is this available only in Toronto right now, or Ontario, or is it Canada-wide? How far are you spread?
So right now, we started downtown Toronto. We operate, in the east, say to Oshawa. We go in as far as Oakville and north up into sort of Vaughan, Richmond Hill area. Now, when we started, so for those that know Toronto, the first customer was at Highway 27 and 7. The next customer was at Leslie and 401. And then we were at Horner and QEW and one in Leaside. So the first four customer base, I was doing this massive loop around the city. And there's been times where things have come up and we've been asked to do things. So we can broker stuff out, but all of the services that we provide are kind of limited to that. It really depends on the volume. And we've done some crazy stuff. I had a woman call me once and said, we do e-waste. And she's like, hey, I've got this TV and I want to recycle it. Well, we went out in the pickup truck and helped her out, because if she wants to do the right thing, it was this massive old TV. She couldn't lift it. We wanted to help out. So I would say that generally speaking, it's Oakville to Oshawa to Vaughan, but I wouldn't limit that. We have huge ambitions to grow, and that's because the more we grow, the more impact we can have. So
yeah, absolutely. I do have a question. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I'm just curious to know, when you compare a competitor waste company with what you offer, now because you're doing a very specialized service, would you say that your rates are maybe 25% more or 10% more or 3x? Do you have a scale like that, or is that something that all depends on a case-by-case basis?
So it's interesting, and it really depends on the size. So when you go with a bigger waste company, because they do things, they have these big trucks, and it's all about volume and stops. And I used to work for them once upon a time. Depending on what it is, there's different metrics. But because we do it differently, and this is how the business evolved, is one truck shows up. So if you are a certain size restaurant and you have 1 to 3 organics carts a week, or maybe you don't have a lot of space, a traditional big waste company, if you want an organics program, they're going to send one truck, and usually it's like a minimum of 3 carts. Where if we come up and we get like 1 garbage cart and 2 recycle carts and 1 organics cart and the oil and the grease trap, we've sort of built the model that we have to make a minimum dollar value to show up. We're more cost effective because we're not charging for a minimum 3 organics carts, which is the most expensive part of what we do. And we're doing lots of different things to try to drive that down. We work with a lot of breweries in Toronto, and we're picking up brew grains and we're bringing it to a farm to feed the cattle. We've started picking up juice pulp and we're bringing it to a company that feeds it to black soldier fly larvae, which then enters back into the food system. We're doing the composting. So I wouldn't say that we're more expensive. I would say that in a lot of cases, if you compare us to actually diverting everything, we're less expensive. And as you get up higher, it's people like nice things, and we provide a really good service. So I would say that our costing is commensurate with the level of service that we give. I'm very proud to say that we've got all 5-star reviews on Google, and I'm very adamant about that. Being in the hospitality space, like when we bring new people on and we train them, we're like, hey, do you remember when you go into a really nice restaurant and how they treated you like gold? I know we're picking up garbage in the back alley at 4 a.m., but act like you're serving at a fancy French restaurant, right?
Love that.
And that's our approach to it, right? So I think that we bring lots of value. We charge appropriately for that.
Something's coming to mind. I have to ask, you mentioned that you do a lot of different pickups of different types of product and waste. What happens when you do a pickup and you have multiple different types of waste that has to get diverted to different types of facilities? Do you pick it up, you aggregate, do you separate? How does your flow work, if you don't mind sharing that?
So let's talk about the truck that services the restaurant. Yeah, so the truck shows up and we have different carts, right? Just like in the city of Toronto, they have all those carts, right? They're wheelie bins, and the organics is a 32-gallon cart, and then the waste and the recycle are 96-gallon carts. So the carts are basically all look the same, but the lids are black for landfill, blue for recycle, and green for organics or compost. And then we have pails for oil, and then there's obviously the vac for the grease trap. And the heavy carts get loaded on the bottom, the waste and the recycle, which are usually lighter because there's no organics in it, they get loaded up top. Cardboard just kind of goes everywhere. And then the oil goes on a rack, a custom-built rack that we made for the truck. And really it's about, the efficiency is getting everything on there. So then we go to different places. So typically our first stop is where we drop off the recycling and the waste to our partner in Pickering. The driver then pulls those off and drops them off. We have a unique brand of cart that we use where they nest inside of each other. So as we empty them, we put them inside of each other like cups, right? And then organics and the oil will come back to our facility.
Shane, I got to interject for a second. Before you go to the composting, go back to the recycling for a second, because people already know in Canada especially that we only recycle, 9 to 13% of all the products that can be recycled. How does your facility differ? Do they really recycle the product? What do you have to say about on that particular aspect? Because even in my mind, I'm thinking, are they at capacity or do they have room to do more recycling?
So it's interesting, and I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you a couple of things. It's interesting because you're asking me questions, and I'm like, I know more than I thought I know, right? Or I thought I knew. And there was an article some time ago, and it was like we've only recycled 9% of all plastic that have ever been produced. If you are in a municipality, so in Toronto or wherever you are, when I started in the waste business, my first position was supervising the local waste collectors in Mississauga and Brampton. And so when you're in a municipality and they dump that recycling there, it goes to a facility called the MRF, which is a material recovery facility. And that can be conveyor belt with people hand sorting, and technology is evolving, like what I was saying about how we're going to have the optical sorters and stuff like that, DAI sorters. And so there's different levels, and really it depends on the size of the volume that comes in. So a big city like Toronto, they subcontract that MRF. And so they might pick out, in the first bit of the line, people throw random stuff in there. They're like, if I throw shoes in there, they'll go to like the Salvation Army or something like that. That doesn't happen. You shouldn't put that there. But they would pick out contaminants like that, that would come off the line. And then it'll go through, and there'll be, there's these things called eddy currents, and so they inject air, and like aluminum cans go this way and paper goes that way. And when it comes to the plastic, plastic is a market like many other commodities. And so number ones are your plastic water bottles or your pop bottles, your PETs. So those are highly recyclable. Those are often used to either make more water bottles, or they get recycled into polyester a lot. So a lot of clothing has polyester in it. And so that's where some of that goes. And then there's HDPE, which are, if you get a bucket from Home Depot or your laundry detergent bottles, it's like a heavier gauge kind of plastic. And so that's highly recyclable. And those are probably your two most valuables. In fact, actually, I was talking to this plastic recycler the other day, and he's like, hey, yeah, HDP is crazy. It's like $600 a ton or something like that. That's almost like scrap metal rates. And I have no idea why, but so that's recyclable. And then you have your 3 through 7s. And so that's your, your plastic candy bar wrapper. That stuff typically gets baled together. About 2 years ago, 90% of North American recyclables went to China. And then China said, your stuff is crap, but it's contaminated and we're not taking it anymore. I mean, they said it a little nicer than that, but that was the gist of it. Depending on the age of the people watching, I still remember, recycling started probably before I can remember, but I remember being young, and I was told, like, make sure you wash that container out. And like, you don't actually have to do that anymore. But as a result, China didn't want the stuff. And what's interesting is I talk to people and they're like, hey, we can't recycle it, or the big waste haulers won't recycle it, or can't recycle it. And I say, well, hey, can't and won't. There's a fine line between can't and won't. And maybe it's because there's not enough money in it. And I get it. We have to make money to, survive. But I'd rather make a little less money and divert more waste. So we have a gentleman that used to work with us that has gone off to work at EFS Plastics, and it's up in that like sort of Dundalk, north of Cambridge area. And so they actually recycle, and they have this proprietary system that separates and helps them recycle 3 through 7. So we're not
cool.
at the volume where we have enough of our own plastics yet, but in the very near future, that's what we're going to do. And, I don't really know why other companies don't do it as much. But what I want to make clear for everybody is that if you're in a municipality and you put the stuff in the blue bin, those companies are under contract to make sure that stuff is recycled. So I don't know for sure that some of it didn't go to places where it shouldn't, but generally speaking, if you're in a municipality and you put stuff in the blue bin, it does get recycled. It's just on the commercial side where it really doesn't happen that much. Our stuff, goes to a place that makes sure it gets separated and recycled.
Good. Well, that's music to my ears, because I want to make sure that if it's getting done that way properly, that it's going through Rethink, that it's actually going to get composted, it's going to get recycled. Before we jumped off at the recycling, you mentioned then you go to the composting site. Now, you mentioned the composting site is out in Belleville. So from Toronto to Belleville, do you make that journey all the time?
There's different types of or levels of organics, if you will. So we take it to our facility and the oil gets collected, consolidated, and then someone comes and collects that and turns that into biodiesel. And then you have different types of organics. So we have the brew grains, and we started with one brewery, and now I think we're like 7 or 8, and we're hauling somewhere between 5,000 and 15,000 pounds of brew grain from craft brewers in the city, and we're bringing it to a farm and feeding it to cattle. Then you would have clean organics, so clean are not contaminated with packaging and stuff like that. So clean organics can go to a farm that has a digester outside of Guelph. And you have what's considered to be, dirty organics where there's packaging. So, somebody has a sandwich, that they buy somewhere, and there's a wrapper or something like that, and they throw it in the bin, or it could be like a yogurt container. So it's organics where it's mostly organics, but it's dirty, right? There's packaging. And so there's a cost to that. It's more expensive. And basically that stuff would go to a digester as well. And they just have this depackaging equipment. And the challenge with that stuff is that, there's no magic wand that it's like, oh, the organics just come out. Basically, they pulverize this stuff. And the organics get squeezed out, and they do go into a digester. Is better than all of that going to the landfill. But then that packaging, because it's so mixed with so much stuff, that goes, to landfill. But it's such a small portion of the total weight of what's there. And then from the composting, so we'll consolidate that. Interesting fact is for our customers, so we've got a couple of customers, shout out to them, Noble Burgers and Somoon Superstar, Aveling Brewery, that are actively buying the compostable packaging, and we're collecting the stuff. So we consolidate that stuff and we run it to Belleville, to a compost facility there, to ensure that it gets composted. And an interesting fact that we've learned in this, we've actually started working with a couple of movie projects. In that quick serve model, with that packaging that stays, there's really very little organics in it. If you go into a burger shop, you eat your burger and your fries, and there's really very little left. So when we did that pilot with No Bowl, we had to add organics to the compost, because it's a recipe. You need nitrate, which is the organic waste, and the packaging acts as part of the carbon source. And we had to add food to it in order to make the recipe work for it to compost.
Break down. Yeah. That's brilliant. Shane, tell viewers how they can get in touch with you.
I think you can see on the screen there, you can follow us on Instagram, Rethink Rink. I'm on LinkedIn, Shane Harker. Our website is Rethink Resource with no S on the end, rethinkresource.ca. There's an info or contact us on there. And if you need some help, and even for people not out, in Toronto, if you want to have a chat and have some questions or want to understand why it is, reach out to us. Our number is 866-60-THINK. They can call in and get a hold of me, and we can have some conversations.
Awesome. I'm going to leave all the details in the description below. But Shane, I want to thank you for doing your part, because I think you're doing more than your part, to be honest with you. You're helping others achieve that zero waste sustainability goal. And I want to thank you for not only picking up this type of entrepreneurial spirit, making a difference in the world, but at the same time, you're coming out and you're walking the walk, my man. So thank you for your services, and I hope many more people contact you, get in touch with you, and start closing their loops too, because you know what? It can be done now. So that's all I got to say, man. And I'm just really proud of what you guys are doing. I hope that more and more people jump on board and they understand the value that you bring to the table. And look, those diversion reports, priceless. Thank you.
Listen, Alex, thank you. This what you're doing now with the food packaging TV, I think it's invaluable, so that it might not be the right time for everybody to switch to compostables, but educating people and understanding what they are, I think is so invaluable. And like, you've taught me so much. So, thanks for your caring about it and sharing our word and doing what you do. I think that I really appreciate it, and I'm quite certain that other people do as well. So thank you.
Well, folks, I enjoyed that adventure. I hope you did too. Shane has taken us on a very interesting road, and if you're a restaurant, supermarket, or heck, even a distributor like we are, you've got a warehouse, everyone can do their part and move that one step towards being a more zero-waste company. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Food Packaging TV. My name is Elish P. Next week, we're going to be covering the load and seal bags from Helix, a Novalex company. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss that next video. Please feel free to subscribe, like, share, comment. We'll see you, that's right, next week. Peace out!